Hello, welcome back. It's Dr. Drredfrizzle here again, and I'm going to be talking to you about life processes for your Key Stage 3. Okay, so first of all, I'll write out what the life processes are, so we can learn this by something called Mrs. Gren. Okay, don't know if you've heard of this, but anyway, it stands for movement, respiration, sensitivity, growth, reproduction, excretion, and nutrition. Okay, so movements where we move around. Respiration is the release of energy from glucose. Now, in case you don't know this, I'll just write you out an equation for respiration. So you have oxygen and glucose, which is a type of sugar, which changes into carbon dioxide, or CO2, as I've shortened it to, and water. And basically, oxygen needs to be delivered to our muscle cells so that they can respire. So basically, how is this done? So first of all, we have our lungs. So we breathe in oxygen to our lungs. So I'll draw you the structure of the lungs first and describe that to you quickly. So we have here our trachea, or our windpipe, goes up to our throat. This is our throat here. Throat. And it splits off into individual tubes, which are known as bronchi. And these split off into more smaller tubes called bronchioles, which end in little fluffy air sacs. They look like little sheep, and these are called alveoli. Okay, so alveoli are where the capillaries are. Capillaries surround the alveoli, and these are type of blood vessels. I might have discussed them with you before. So you have veins, capillaries, and arteries. So your veins take blood to the heart, your arteries take blood away, and your capillaries are basically the smallest blood vessel. So supposing you've got your veins taking blood to the heart, before it gets to the veins in the first place, it goes through something called venules that you don't need to know about yet, but they're basically small veins. But before that, capillaries are linked up to the arteries, so it acts as a sort of cycle. And what this does is it helps deliver the oxygen that's required to our muscle cells. So the blood from these capillaries picks up oxygen from the lungs that we've breathed in. The process of breathing, by the way, is called ventilation. And then once that happens, it travels to our muscle cells, which then respire, and then obviously respiration produces CO2 or carbon dioxide, which needs to be breathed out again. So basically the blood circulates back to the lungs and it's exhaled by the process of ventilation to remove the excess carbon dioxide. Also when we breathe out we lose some water as well, and that's pretty much all you need to know about respiration. So I'll just quickly discuss with you some things about the skeleton. So I'll draw you out a person. I'm not very good at people, so I'll draw you a stick diagram like I normally do. Your head bone is called the skull, but can also be called the cranium. Then you have your collarbone, which is where your collar is, so that's called the clavicle. Then you have, that makes it better because you need to see your elbows on this diagram, otherwise it won't work. Basically, as you go past your elbow, there's two bones. The one that's under, so basically this one here is called your ulna, and this bone that runs down the back here is called your radius. Okay, so I'll just write ulna and radius. And your upper arm, or this bit here, is called your humerus. There's only one bone that runs through there. A big bone, it's called a long bone actually, the special type of bone that it is, and that's the humerus. Then you have your rib cage, which is made up of about 12 to 13 ribs, I think. Your backbone, your vertebral column, that's otherwise known as, and that's split up into a few different sections. So, top section is your cervical. The next section is your thoracic. Next section is your lumbar. Next section is sacral. And the next section is coccygeal, otherwise known as your coccyx. Okay, so that's mostly what you need to know about bones. You also need to know about joints in a bit more detail. So where bones join together, you get a couple of different joints. One of these is called hinge, which is basically called that because it's like a door opening and closing. It can only contract or extend. Alright, relax in brackets, because it's not always, I shouldn't really have said extend there, because in our arm we have a muscle here called our bicep, and a muscle underneath called our tricep. Now that together, it's called an antagonistic pair. You probably haven't heard of that, but that's basically where they work together, so when one's contracting, the other's relaxing. So as you pull your arm up, your bicep on the top contracts, but your tricep underneath relaxes. But then as you extend, your tricep contracts and your bicep relaxes. Okay? And when it contracts, it gets shorter and fatter, and when it extends, it gets longer and thinner. Okay? So that's what you need to know about that, and also the structure. So these are our two bones. At the end, I'll shade it in so you can see it more clearly. It's not dark like this, but this is called cartilage, what's at the end of your bone. And what this basically does is it prevents your bones rubbing against each other. So it's like spongy material, and the synovial fluid is between the two bones to help lubrication, which prevents friction between the two bones. So I'll label this synovial fluid. This whole thing is called the joint capsule, by the way, and this is sealed by some tissue up here. So I'll label this joint capsule. And this is basically between bones. And there's a few types of joint. There's the hinge joint that I've just discussed with you, but there's also ball and socket. And ball and socket is your hip and your shoulder. Your shoulder one is called your pectoral girdle. Your hip is called your pelvic girdle. You don't actually need to know that, but you do need to know about the ball and socket for key stage 3 and your hinge joint. Okay, so there are your two joints. These are the life processes. You also might want to know a bit about how the lungs and muscles change around the lungs as you breathe in and out. So basically, when you inhale or breathe in, what happens is the diaphragm, which is usually curved, flattens out to make space for more air. So I'll write down your diaphragm. Diaphragm is spelled quite funny. I'll just spell it out to you. D-I-A-P-H-R-A-G-M. It's quite a strange spelling. Diaphragm, it's said though. And it flattens as you inhale. So inhale, diaphragm, flattens. Now, in addition to this, what happens is your rib cage moves up and out, and the air pressure in lungs increases. Now what this means is that the air pressure outside the body is lower than inside, because the pressure is increased inside. So that's why the air is forced out. Then when the air is forced out, the diaphragm goes back to this banana shape. The other thing you need to know is the rib cage doesn't just move up and out on its own. It also needs something called an intercostal muscles, which contract to help lift it up. So that's what you need to know about. That's what you need to know about breathing. Sorry. And this is most of what you need to know about the different life processes. I mean, The other thing you need to know is you need to be able to distinguish between living and non-living things. Basically, a living thing needs to carry out all these different life processes. You're probably thinking plants don't move. With this one here, movement. Plants do actually move because they move. They orientate themselves, which basically means twist around towards the light, because they need sunlight to photosynthesize, which basically just means make their food. You'll learn as you get a bit older that photosynthesis isn't just making food. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but for now you just need to know that it's making food for your key stage 3. Hope you've enjoyed this video and hope it's been helpful about the processes of life. And remember Mrs. Gren for your life processes. Thanks. See you in the next video. Bye.